Thank you, Pauline. As Pauline has said, welcome to our 51st year and annual dinner. So it's been, from Civil Liberties' point of view, an extraordinarily tough year. And I would probably say the most intensive of the 10 years I've been actively re-engaged with Civil Liberties. And of course it's also been the most depressing of any of those years. A quick run through will give you a sense of why, should you need to have any information to understand why it's been a bit of a depressing year. We've done all the usual things this year, but we have moved into some new territory. We moved, for example, into electoral reform issues, which we don't normally get involved in. But we got involved because of the 2013 Senate election process, which I'm sure you'd all agree deeply breached democratic principles and pulled civil liberties in. We were very engaged in the review process. Out of that parliamentary review process came a very intelligent and a very reasonable and sound report published in May, and you haven't heard anything more about it, which is a great shame. We still hope that the two major parties might pick it up again. Not likely, really. In the same vein, we have just recently again engaged in electoral politics, or electoral policy rather, around the truly disgraceful Borsak Bill in New South Wales, the reintroduction, a move back towards the property vote, motivated by, as far as we can see, nothing other than knocking off a Lord Mayor. That bill is now law, and that bill now has built into it the capacity for this to be applied to other councils across New South Wales without coming back to Parliament. We, of course, tried to influence the hasty, the unwarranted and the ill-conceived changes to the New South Wales Bail Act without any success. We did have more success with the support of Labor, the Greens and some of the crossbenchers on ameliorating the New South Wales government push around mandatory minimum sentencing. Remember the one-punch furor some months back? We continued a long campaign, and still unsuccessfully, to get some independent mechanism in around the review of police critical incidents. We joined, in terms of all successful stuff, we joined the groundswell of anger and opposition to the Brander's proposed changes to the Race Discrimination Act, and success, an immensely enjoyable success, not many of them. We, like I'm sure all of you do in a variety of organisations, continue in all sorts of contexts to manifest our deep opposition to our shameful asylum seekers' policies and practices, and we intervene in whatever forums we can. And we can't meet tonight without talking about the other area, the immense effort around the veritable avalanche of counter-terrorism laws in Australia. We've been scrambling for a goodly part of this year to try and temper the government's agenda around changes to the national security legislation, much of which, of course, was a legacy agenda from the past Labor government, unfinished business from there, but with a few nasty additions to it. Despite near unanimous opposition from all the organisations who responded, who we would, I guess, see any affinity with, I mean, even all the newspaper proprietors, including News Limited, were there with one submission. Despite that, and the only significant exception from organisations came from ASIO and the Federal Attorney General's Department. But despite all that, we gave only really fairly minor amendments as a result of all of that. And now that the bill, yesterday, or was it the day before, it's all a bit of a blur, but now that that bill is through the Senate, we can expect it to become law very quickly. And that will give us, amongst other things, it will give us an ASIO whose officers are authorised to act unlawfully, with 4 exclusions, unlawfully with immunity from civil or criminal prosecution when involved in an authorised special intelligence operation. One gain that we did have, small but probably significant, was that given they're going to go ahead, the committee did recommend, and we did get a move from the Director General of ASIO being the authorising agent for it to the Attorney General being the person who will authorise these special intelligence operations. We got a new offence for the unauthorised disclosure of any information relating to these special intelligence operations, and this offence applies to any person, and it carries a maximum penalty of 5 years jail. There's no exemption of any kind for media, though the committee did recommend the public interest clause to be built into the legislation. It was not. We also get an ASIO with an extraordinarily expansive access on the basis of a single warrant to computers of both suspects and non-suspects alike, and because the definition of a computer in the bill included computer network, which in common parlance, depending on which submission to it, but in common parlance means anything from a local network to a university network, to a business network, to the global internet. Initially, many of us, certainly we did, and certainly I did, thought that this was either bad drafting or that people drafting it and people thinking about it were finding it very difficult conceptually to work out how to do it. It seems to me it's now very clear that the decision to not define a computer network any less expansively than what it means in common parlance was both considered and deliberate. So I think these are alarming new laws. I think they are unwarranted, and I think they will have a chilling effect on journalism, whistleblowers. Well, whistleblowers have got a very clear notice here in terms of ASIO's special intelligence operations activities. It's not clear that they'll make our community any safer, but they will certainly make it a less open community as they chip away again at our freedoms. And as you know, I'm sure from media, that was tranche 1, as they're called. Tranche 2 appeared in Parliament, was it yesterday or the day before? Tranche 2 is the Foreign Fighters Bill. Now this bundle has some, what seems to be reasonable proposals, though maybe not necessarily reasonable proposals, but it has a larger number of disturbing proposals. But the good news is it has been referred to a parliamentary committee again, so the public and the Parliament can consider it and put forward their views. But there's a small hitch. I was, as were many other organisations engaged today, informed that we knew our submissions had to be due midday next Friday, and I did say next Friday, but if we wish to participate, which of course we do, in giving evidence to the parliamentary committee, that has to happen on the same day as well. Civil Liberties thinks this is a scandalous timeline, and we've made our views known to the Attorney General's office and to the shadow attorneys, asking for their for them to raise this again. And we think it's deeply disrespectful of the Australian public, but so it goes. And also think it's a reckless way of going about lawmaking, and particularly with such significant laws. But let's step back a bit from that depressing political context, and of course a pretty perturbing, indeed frightening world context. A few words about the organisation. Perversely, or maybe not at all surprisingly, Civil Liberties as an organisation has travelled well this year. One thing, and you can see it if you look around the room a bit, one thing is we have been considerably invigorated by an influx of both younger members and large numbers of younger supporters. We've got an intern program, a strong intern program, which brings us more intern applications now than we can possibly cope with. That might have something to do with the rugby, but we actually are getting fantastic people coming in to work with us as interns. Our committee now has a much more youthful profile than it had a few years ago, and we hope that process is going to continue next month at our AGM. And needless to say, we've got a pretty impressive committee, a lot of expertise. A few words about the forums and the focus of work. We've put a lot of energy into this year to building our traditional forums. We've got a very strong media profile, particularly through our absent president, Stephen Blanks, of whom more in a minute. We do a lot of work. We've got very effective behind-the-scenes networks in media, and we use them a lot. Generally speaking, we have very good connections with both the New South Wales Parliament and the Australian Parliament, both up front and in terms of backroom, in terms of ongoing discussions, and with agencies and with other organisations. And of course, as some of you might know, we've actually got a vaguely contemporary website and net presence at long last. And of course, we're also now certainly relevant. I'm going to end by giving Stephen Blanks deep apologies. He had to scramble to race to China on business, and he's still there. We hope he's been extremely successful so he can come back as a very rich sponsor and transform Civil Liberties. But he wanted me to say a few words, and I'm going to pick up his last words because I think his last words are more apposite than my last words. If I can read from Stephen's text of about an hour ago from somewhere in China. He says, "The freedoms that Civil Liberties champions are vital freedoms and are to be celebrated. I wish you a fabulous celebration tonight. Next week, it's back to the hard work of thwarting the further degradation of Australians' freedoms." I'm going to say again what Pauline said, what we always say on this night. If you are interested in joining our work, join, become a supporter. If you're a member who haven't renewed for a few years, if we ever needed you, we need you now. Come back, rejoin. And a fabulous raffle and a fabulously balanced silent auction. You can, showing how absolutely non-partisan we are. You can honour the great history of the Labor Party, or you can lunch with the leader of the Greens. Thank you.